A modern civil service.
Modern civil service.
A modern civil service.
To me, a modern civil service is one that's ready to lead the UK through the next big challenges.
People that reflect the society that we serve, designing services built around the customer to deliver the outcomes they need.
Skilled,
Innovative, ambitious.
A modern civil service.
Hello everybody, this is podcast 2 from Modernisation and Reform. My name's Sapana Agrawal, I'm the Director of Modernisation and Reform in the Cabinet Office, and today I am very excited to be joined by Ravi Chand, who's the Director leading the Places for Growth programme. And so without further ado, Ravi, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Places for Growth.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you for the invitation to join this podcast. So, Ravi Chand, I'm the SRO for the Places for Growth portfolio for the Civil Service. And as for the programme, I don't know how many colleagues know about the programme, but the programme was all about getting roles, senior roles certainly, out of London into different parts of the UK. We know historically that London has had a significantly larger proportion of the senior civil service and the grade 6 and 7 in the civil service based in London, particularly, and also with our policy-making capability. And there's an opportunity here where our colleagues across the country in different parts of the UK are saying, actually, my career opportunities are limited, and actually, if I want to get promoted, I have to go to London. That can't be right.
And Ravi, just to bring Places for Growth to life for us, could you tell us about any of the teams that you've met on your journeys around the country, or any of the new faces that you've met who are new to the civil service that have joined because of a new location that we've opened up?
Yeah, so with Darlington, so the new locations that we've really put some energy into on top of existing. So I would talk about big cities because I've been to all the big cities and met staff. But if I look at some of the things like Darlington, Wolverhampton, Stoke-on-Trent, Wrexham, where we're trying to get roles as well. These are the places where there have been real excitement about us getting jobs and stuff. There. I mean, the example I gave earlier around Wolverhampton is a really good one. I think seeing there were younger recruits hires who never thought they'd have a job in the civil service because they didn't exist, right? Yeah. In that same way, and we had pretty much shut most big government functions in places like Wolverhampton, other than DWP Job Centre, that kind of stuff, in smaller numbers. So that's the excitement. So I think we're beginning to see them in these places. But if I look at the other places, people say, opportunities for promotion, opportunities for new kinds of work. But more importantly, my sense is, when I talk about opportunity, it's not just about job, it's about the variety of jobs that are available, which really, to be honest, historically was the preserve of London, because London had the huge variety. You could jump from one civil service department to another, like I did, in London. But you couldn't do that so readily in these places. And you could see that they were talking about this in a way that's really positive and, for me, energising.
Really exciting. Ravi, tell us about, when did this programme start and what was the catalyst for setting up the programme?
Yeah, so there were a number of things. So the programme started a couple of years ago. So a few years ago, I say to it about 3 years ago, I think, before I arrived. And the idea at the time, ambition was getting roles out of London, because there were a number of reports at the time. One of them, which was Careers Without Barriers, about lack of opportunity in different parts of the UK. As time on, when I arrived and doing a lot more work and analysis with ministers about where we might put those roles, what those numbers might look like, that work led to an announcement by then the Chancellor Rishi Sunak to relocate 22,000 roles in budget 2020. And we use that as our kind of baseline point to say, right, here's an opportunity now with a figure that's quite clear and compelling in terms of roles that we want to relocate out of London. From that point, we did some really interesting work with Modernisation and Reform, and to try and make sure that this is not just a separate piece of activity or work stream, that it's part of a bigger whole, which is what Modernisation and Reform is doing, and it became part of the Declaration of Government Reform. And that's really meaningful and important, and I think makes much more sense to colleagues across Whitehall about what we're trying to do here. Beyond that, Places for Growth then was engaged with the levelling up agenda, and certainly when Michael Gove was Chancellor of Duchy Lancaster, he in Cabinet Office, he had a real interest in Places for Growth and how that supported levelling up. So when he went on to take that responsibility in Duluck, he was very keen that Places for Growth was part of the government's commitment towards levelling up. And so it was. We also then engaged departments and Secretary of State and ministers in other departments to look at what their commitments would be to relocate civil service roles to different parts of the UK as part of the government's levelling up ambitions. And that, again, features, I say, in the white paper. So there's been a number of things along the journey, but actually, in many ways, repeating and re-emphasising the importance of this.
So you've been spending time travelling the length and breadth of the country and have been meeting lots of our new recruits into the hubs. So can you tell us some of the things that you've been hearing from those people? What does it feel like to be for example, in the second HQ of the Cabinet Office in Glasgow at the moment?
Brilliant. I mean, I had some amazing... The energy and the buzz in Glasgow last week when I was there was amazing. And I've worked in and out of Glasgow a lot over the years with different departments as well, because I've had teams there. But the buzz is different. It's feeling really good. People feel energised. They've got a great place to work, a beautiful office. But that's not it. Offices themselves don't do it. It's a sense of community, sense of belonging, sense of being valued, sense of being able to have a voice and contribute to the way we think and we work. The fact that Cabinet Office hasn't had a sizable number of this type of role and a mix of roles as it has now in a place like Glasgow, it speaks for itself. You can see now how people feel they have opportunities. The important thing was, and I've worked with a number of colleagues across these departments in Glasgow, right, and in different parts of the UK, as I get to know them, and they say, well, some of them work for me in different departments, actually. They said, I thought I was only going to work in this department for the rest of my career. I now realise I can work for the Cabinet Office, I can work for HMRC, I can work for DWP, They start to get a sense of the way they can work with other departments. We are creating something that was long overdue in terms of opportunities for people and excitement. And in Wolverhampton, when I went to Wolverhampton, when we opened it for the first time, new starters, apprentices, really didn't understand what civil service did. And I don't know. I started during the pandemic, and this is the first chance I had to come into the building, and they were really excited. And Jeremy Pockenton, the Perm Sec for Delight, he was there, at the opening of the launch, and Matt Thurston, their finance CFO, sorry, you could see how delighted they were to meet their Perm Sec and senior colleagues in the building and they get out there quite often, as I understand, but that there are now career opportunities for people in places like Wolverhampton that actually we would often dismiss very easily and very readily. And I got some huge, beautiful stories about people and how they'd lost hope for jobs and they now got jobs.
Brilliant. What's the biggest hub outside of London? And what departments are part of that hub?
So hubs are more, in some places, aren't just a hub. So we've always looked at a hub as a building or a single building or two buildings next to each other or near each other. So we're now kind of campuses. So if I look at it, I mean, our larger numbers are in places like Newcastle, where we've got large operational teams, and Manchester, which has got a significant workforce, roughly, I think, about 24,000 people, somewhere around there, and growing, and we've just opened a new building there. Because we've had big operational areas like those. So those are the big ones you're going to go to, and with size of workforce. Other places, Leeds has got a significant workforce, but they are not just one department, they're multiple departments. And so you're going to get 5, 6, 7 departments having a presence in that area. But they all had their own leases in their own buildings before. And they didn't talk to each other, let alone talk to the person above or below them on a floor plate in a building. And now you've got them in the same buildings or buildings adjacent to each other. Very different. Government is shifting in a direction that even I didn't think would happen at the pace it is now, 4 or 5 years ago.
So in these campuses where you've got multiple departments present, does it feel more like one civil service?
Yeah. So I was speaking to colleagues from the Leeds office, and they were saying, look, we don't think of ourselves as Cabinet Office in the Leeds office. We think of us as the Leeds office, which is made up of a number of departments. You can see the kind of sense of community you're creating in Leeds. Maybe we should have some competition between Leeds office and Bristol office and others, and some sports day thing going on. To encourage departments to join rather than individuals departments to fight. To compete against each other. Actually, have Leeds compete against. I don't know. But we should do something exciting like that, because there was a real genuine sense of we are Leeds, we are Glasgow, we are Bristol, we are Newcastle. These things are great.
That's really lovely to hear. Let me pitch you an idea. So I used to work at a company that was in multiple locations, but within each office, we often didn't work together that much. And so every year we would do something called the Office Challenge to bring everybody together. And it was a competition, and we had to come up with interesting ideas, and then we'd get together as an office to learn the skills to deliver on that idea. And it was so bonding. We made a film one year, we put on a circus another year. It was really challenging. There was people like learning how to sort of tightrope walk and all sorts of things. An idea for you.
No, I think it's a great idea. Like anything that creates a sense of community now in our buildings, on our people, and and everything they need in buildings, so they feel like it's an opportunity to learn off each other, network, talk, have fun. And I think we take the fun out of sometimes the civil service. I'd had a great conversation with the minister earlier around sense of community and why it's important. Sports day, fun day, things that we should do to bring people together to convene in workplaces is fantastic. And where we have that, you see larger numbers of people coming into the office because they really love being there, working with each other. Where it's lacking, where it feels sterile, where you don't have your own branding or you can't even tell what team sits where, people don't always feel a sense of belonging. We need to do that. We need to fix that. We got that wrong. I genuinely think that. And what you're giving as an example are just good examples of what we should do more of, because it's okay to be a civil servant and to have fun and enjoy what you're doing and be proud of what you're doing and why we're doing it. And I don't hear ministers say you shouldn't. Quite I had a really good conversation with the minister earlier just on this issue, where and I said, well, we have gyms in the buildings, and people now go to their local gym down the road near them rather than the building. They'll come to the building, they do their work, they get lunch, they'll get to the gym, a sense of And he said even the gym in the Commons was really good as well. I didn't get from that whether he went to the gym or not, but nonetheless, it was quite interesting. But we need to, again, I would encourage us all, particularly senior colleagues. I said I don't want to stress too much on the senior point, but when we meet with ministers, it's really important to remind ministers the importance of the soft stuff. It's the soft stuff that energises us, brings us in, makes us feel proud of what we're doing, and give the best. Deliver on our duty to do the best we can for the government of the day. Within the civil service values, that will happen if we can create that excitement and and that euphoria, around the workplace. And I think people just feel sometimes that the workplace can feel draining because it feels sterile. There's a chance to change it. Maybe you should be a pillar in the reform plan. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking exactly the same thing. Reform 2.0 has to be focused on more fun. So, Ravi, 6,000 roles, and it sounds like 22,000 in total to come. Who are these people? Are they people that are moving from London back home? Are they people from London that are moving to new places? Or are we really properly recruiting from these new locations?
Yeah, so the roles, when we developed the programme, we looked at develop the programme in a way that be least disruptive to the civil service and its operations and the best value as well. That's really important. I've been involved in a number of big transformations and changes, downsizing, upsizing, and what we wanted to do is avoid voluntary exits or redundancies, because they're hugely costly and disruptive and really unnecessary actually for a program like this. So we developed a model that says we will use civil service churn, the vacancy rate in civil service that exists in London. And so every time a vacancy arises in London, we can relocate that vacancy from London to another part of the UK. Therefore, you're not asking anyone to relocate physically. That's first step. Second step then is, of course, we also know a significant number, or proportional number of our workforce, those 20,000, and a number of senior colleagues, grew up in different parts of the UK. You probably went to university there. We also know from our fast stream programs, significant numbers of fast streamers came from outside of London to live in London. And there's an opportunity that says they came here because this is where the opportunity was. Now that we're able to move those opportunities to different parts of the UK, if that is home for them, there is an opportunity for them to relocate. And as a consequence, we developed an enabling policy that individuals could apply for relocation costs. Under tax rules, you can claim up to £8,000 tax-free for relocations where the employer asks you to relocate. That's great. We're working with HMRC colleagues on this. And we said departments where they can afford it can go up to as high as 14 if someone's costs are significantly higher. But of course, there'd be a taxable element to the remainder of that. And those kind of things may seem like irrelevant to what we're trying to do, but actually they are enabling things. And that's really important when you're trying to relocate roles. And so that's some of the things we've done. I've got some brilliant stories from colleagues, senior colleagues, who've moved to other places, family and everything, because that was home for them. And they don't have to be in and around London where, for that career opportunity now exists where they are. But the important thing here is that we are, as we're doing this, making sure that people, when they relocate, feel a sense of belonging, feel that still valued, still feel they have a meaningful career, and it's clear about what opportunities may exist for them. This is not about moving and retiring. It's about moving and staying and growing and developing a really great, amazing civil service. So they're the kind of things we want to do.
And Ravi, it'd be wrong for us to make it sound like the civil service has been based in London only, and only in the last few years have we been moving roles out, because we've been across the country for a very long time. But obviously you're doing something new and different. Could you tell us about the types of roles that were already across the country and what lessons you've learned from previous sort of multi-location work that's been delivered by the government?
Yes, so I've worked in a number of government departments now, Home Office, HMRC, DFID, and Cabinet Office. And I've travelled to a lot of cities and towns and offices across the UK, part of that work. And we have an enormous, really good, amazing workforce in different parts of the UK. And they do a fantastic job. But however, that workforce is predominantly operational, frontline or delivery, or what people often refer to as back office functions. They're not back office functions, they are real mainstream roles that are really important and critical to civil service. But they are in different places. And generally speaking, lower graded work. I say lower graded and more, generally speaking, below HEO, high executive officer grade, or senior executive officer grade. And whereas the more senior roles are normally big team leaders who run big, massive teams, or SCS who run big operational teams, but they're fewer in number overall, considering the size of the overall workforce. So we roughly about 80% of our workforce is outside London. And when you think about it, that's sizable, but when you look at its makeup of more senior grades, they diminish at quite a rate, exponentially. Then you look at the type of roles and say, well, actually, there are hardly any policy-making capability roles. Some departments had them, education, others had some really good work going on. Some departments did put policy roles in the past out of London, but then their ministers at that time decided that wasn't working for them and they put them back into London. So again, we have to make sure they're sustainable and lasting. But in the main, the majority of the senior policy making was in London. And if I look at London, 86% of our policy function SCS were in London. That means, actually, if you want to develop a career in policy, you need to be in London. So we had to find a mechanism to put them outside London. I think of DEFRA, who did some fantastic work by creating these 4 policy hubs. One of them, of course, is London, but three other locations in the UK. You kind of get a sense that they recognise that they can create this policy-making opportunity by putting sizable numbers in those places and creating a career pathway for individuals in those places. That's really, really important. And we want to model and scale that up for all departments. Cabinet Office, again, another really good example. Look at Glasgow, launched last week, fantastic. And Cabinet Office, astronomical how quickly we relocated roles from London to a place like Glasgow.
Brilliant. So you mentioned ministers there, Ravi. Part of the challenge of having policy roles outside of London is face time with perm-secs and ministers. What are we doing to enable sort of the people in outside of London locations to get enough face time with perm-secs and ministers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And people ask me all the time, and it's one of the challenges some departments said, well, if ministers aren't going to go, how can we get senior roles out of London? And it's a really good question to do. So we did some work with the House of Commons and leaders of the House to say, how can we free up ministers to be able to go to different to offices outside London and spend some time with staff in those places. Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg was in the leader of the House at the time. He played a role in that. Now he's our minister here. Has played a really good enabling role in enabling that to happen. Getting ministers out. In these other locations, different parts of the UK, we'd ask departments to identify, if you like, a second HQ or a dual HQ or a joint HQ. That's not London, right? And we would then, working with the Government Property Agency, create ministerial floors, create ministerial facilities in these places. And we've done that. And so now ministers have places they can dock in different parts of the UK. And we're going to grow that, and we'll continue to grow that. And that means ministers are in these other offices actually modelling what we're trying to do. But importantly, that doesn't just stop there. We here certainly have to be working with our ministers. They've been very clear as we engage ministers across Whitehall and through the Ministerial Oversight Board for People and Places chaired by Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg, that we can now start to encourage ministers to stop the behaviour that historically has sucked senior people in for business as usual activity into London for a meeting, and to allow those meetings to take place in different locations. So if I take Beth Russell, who's a DG, Director General in Treasury, she's based in Darlington. She's also the sponsor for the portfolio, and she's able to have those meetings regularly with the Chancellor on calls without the need to dock into London. Right? That's brilliant. I think that's a great way of modelling between ministers and senior civil servants how to get people out of London. And we're beginning to see in other areas as well, other departments are getting it, and we need to get the message across. But it has to be part of, this reform is not just about civil service, it's about the whole of government, how government works. So we have to work with ministers to say, actually, the most effective, cost-effective way of working is this. That's not to say that, I should say, and we remind ministers of this, if it's a crisis, if it's urgent, and if ministers need to convene people urgent in London, colleagues will come to London. This is not about not doing that. This is about saying, for your everyday routine work, that engagement can happen on video. And the pandemic, as bad as it was, also taught some valuable lessons about we are able to do this. The digital capabilities exist today that did not exist maybe a couple of years ago.
Brilliant, thank you. So Ravi, it sounds like if we can line up all of our senior stakeholders and they can start having rich conversations with other stakeholders in the region, i.e. private sector companies, other public sector bodies, that our desire is that we would understand the needs of the local people in a way that enables better policy making and delivery planning.
We looked at what engagement looked like and public perception of engagement was with local authorities, partners in cities, regions, working with colleagues in Delac as well on this, and also civil service. And when you look at it, people generally have a reasonable idea what their local authority does. When it comes to central civil service, they have no idea often, and a large proportion don't do unless you work for the civil service, right, or know somebody who works for the civil service. And the insights we drew from some of those discussions, and we convened local partners, local private sector. We ran something with Whitehall Industry Group to bring the private sector organisation together to discuss the place of growth, what it means for them. We convened local authorities, chief executives, partners, academia. And generally speaking, we got a real clear sense that there's really good engagement locally, but a disconnect between local government, central government, in a way that can help join up. Department communities, levelling up communities, they do a fantastic job of trying to make that happen, right? But they alone can't be the one to do it. It has to be a whole of government responsibility to join that up in a way that means something to people. And we've had no end of feedback. Some of it's good, some of it could be better, right, about what we need to do. I think that as we start to relocate, as we start to have a senior presence, as we start to join up a bit more ourselves, as we start to develop, we've set out through Place for Growth portfolio, a desire for each of the areas to develop a local delivery plan, a Place for Growth delivery plan. That plan should have its stakeholders, who we engage with, who's engaging with them, how we're engaging with them, who's going to take the lead, all that kind of stuff. What a talent looks like, what the academic pipelines are, all of that should be set out in local plans. Those plans should be, they're an enabling plan that brings things together to help to do just that, so that we can start to tell in each area the right story that reflects that area in that plan, right? And I think for me, that's a journey we're on. It still has yet to some way to go.
Ravi, a few weeks ago now, the PM announced that we were going to need to reduce the size of the civil service. What implications are there for the Places for Growth programme?
Well, there are, look, the challenge I have on this, and it's a really good question because it's in the minds of a lot of people, and I recognise as I go around Civil Service Live, I'm going to be asked this question by a number of people. Luckily, I have had a number of conversations now with permanent secretary colleagues and director colleagues and DGs and others across departments, as well as other staff of this issue, and with ministers. And again, today I had the opportunity to have another discussion around this. Ministers are absolutely committed to moving roles to places, relocating, because place of growth is not job cuts, it's relocations, right? So let's be clear. And it's about creating opportunity for colleagues in different parts of the UK to have really good, meaningful career opportunities at more senior level that didn't exist in the numbers and the way it has done. It's beginning to do now. And they're committed to doing that. And they want us to continue in that vein. They want to continue to push in that way. But I know, as one permanent secretary colleague said, it's possible to do this, but it's not automatic. And I thought it's a really, really helpful term to use, because it means that actually, as we work through those numbers, we need to have our eye also on how we enable place of growth in levelling up locations to continue to support that mix of grade, mix of roles, start to seed future skills and capabilities that, and a cross-government working in a way that we set out in place of growth, because it's not just about numbers, right? So it's more than numbers. We need to make all that stuff work. So it just means we need to put a lot more effort in our thinking, how we make that, and look at what we can do as enablers, what we can do to dismantle some of the barriers beyond, what those reductions might look like in some places. But importantly also, if there are elements that we should incentivise in some way, we should explore them. And I certainly agree with the Minister that I will come back to him with some thoughts around how we might be able to do some of that. And they are open to it, but they're absolutely committed to doing this and continuing in this direction. And I think we should see this as a genuine commitment, at the very least, to enabling good quality careers in different parts of the UK in a way that didn't exist before.
Ravi, I know that you've got some of your team in London and some of your team in the Cabinet Office, second HQ in Glasgow and potentially other locations. Have you got any tips for managers of how do you manage teams over multiple locations, and how do you get the best out of them and embrace the soft stuff as you just described it?
No, good. Like, there's two organisations I certainly worked in. HMRC do it really well, because HMRC had staff all over the place. Great, they consolidate, and they led the charge for the whole civil service. Actually, hugely commendable what they did. I'm not just saying that because I was their director of workforce at the time, but nonetheless, I think they've done a great job. But they were really good at managing across multiple sites and making sure you have regular docking meetings. But importantly, convening your meeting for board blasting days, think days, activity, strategy day, deep dives, bringing them together, whether it be on the phone or on the video. Back in the day it was phone, much more on the video. We did that with Department of International Development. We had people all over the place around the world, and we'd have them on video, and we could engage all of them at the same time. Once you get into the swing of it, you can really make it work. And that's really important, that as soon as you recognise how you can really bring people in, feel value, feel they're part of something, you can do that. But you can. The days of intrusive management by having someone sat near you are gone, right? I think it may have gone just after the dinosaurs. I don't know. We may have some left, I don't know. But we need to move away from that. We have the technology, the capability to engage our people, in a really creative way. I'm not saying face-to-face should not exist. It should. I feel it's an important part of what we do. And that's why I travel and meet teams in different places, because they value it. But actually, for a lot of the work we're doing, we can still do it digitally and manage and have those conversations. But you must have good, supportive, enabling conversations with our people, right? People, if they're certainly not able to see you, you can't always see what they have had to deal with in their day beforehand, after, because you get a sense of how they're presenting on the camera. So I think we need to do more in shaping how we lead now in a digital world, right? Not standing as the commander-in-chief in front of a whole, army of people and giving orders, but actually being able to engage in a much more helpful, enabling way, whether that be digitally or face-to-face.
Brilliant, thank you. You mentioned leases and property. Is this programme just a way to save money?
The programme will, the portfolio overall will save departments money. But actually, a whole world should be about not just about savings. Saving money in itself is not an end in itself. It shouldn't be. It's about being more efficient and making better use of the finite amount of money the taxpayer can afford to give. And it is not our money; it's the taxpayers' money that we spend wisely. The question is, if I've got multiple departments in different buildings with different lease arrangements, for example, paying sometimes quite extortionate rent, at least on some of these buildings, when actually we can consolidate in a single building with better quality services, which lend themselves to a better environment for productivity. Sure, that's better.
Sounds much better.
And London, just to be clear, a London lease per head, roughly, is about £6,000 per head more FTE than it is outside of London in some of the places we're in. A lot of places we're in. And you think, so if that role did not have to be in London, but we put it in London because we think is easier, because I don't know, the team leader thinks they want them all around them because they're still in the old world of intrusive face-to-face management. That's an expensive form of management, really. Yeah. So we need to be smart. I think just be smarter in the way we spend our money.
So Ravi, that makes a lot of sense. What would be your advice to managers who are trying to scale up their teams outside of London? I think a bit of nervousness with sort of team leaders is that at the beginning of this journey, you might just have one or two people in another location. You're sort of worried about them. Any advice to people that are just starting out on this journey?
Look, when I arrived in Place of Growth, a lot of them on my team were in London. As the vacancies rose, they've been recruiting in Glasgow. And I got them. And I'm not with them. I got someone in Belfast. I got someone in Wales, in Cardiff. In different parts of the UK, Leeds, because we need to cover the country. As long as you are as you understand how you can best lead and manage colleagues, the other colleagues, and get the best from them. It can be anywhere in the UK. That's the important thing here, right? It's not something to worry about, it's something to embrace. But if you worry about it, you may not see the opportunity. But if you look at how you might embrace it, you might see more of the opportunities, how you can make it work for you. And that's what I would encourage colleagues to do.
Ravi, do you have any advice for civil servants out there who are thinking about taking up a role in a Places for Growth location, or if they've got a friend in one of those locations that isn't a civil servant yet and is thinking about applying?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, if you're a civil servant, go have a conversation with your line manager. It's really, really important because your line manager can look at how it will support their contribution to overall department's place of growth and levelling up ambitions. That's really important. And if it's all agreed and signed off, brilliant, fantastic. And then don't forget, you can, depending on your departmental policy, apply for relocation costs or towards the cost of removals and all that kind of stuff. And it'll be set out in your departmental policy on that. If you're outside the civil service, we are, in each of these areas, we're working with the Government Recruitment Service as part of a campaign called Closer to Home, where we're really marketing roles that we're looking to recruit for departments in different parts of the UK, right across the UK. Look out for them. And because they will show what's available to you, and you should really apply. Now, if you're not clear, go to CS jobs or civil service jobs, just Google it, click on the link, go register, and every job in your area near you that's civil service related will be on there, and you could apply directly there.
Ravi, one final question for you. What does a modern civil service mean to you?
So me, a modern civil service is one where in all parts of the UK, we have the most diverse, best available talent skills that we need to deliver great, brilliant public services, excellent public policy advice to ministers, and support to deliver government priorities. That's really, really important. In those locations, we have very clear pipelines to the most senior levels, senior roles, and that individuals feel valued for their contributions and they're able to contribute. They feel a degree of autonomy about what they're doing and the direction in which they can deliver, those services in different parts of the UK. It's a workplace that has all the modern capabilities that they need in order to be able to collaborate and support each other as well, and that's really, really important. But I'm going to keep coming to this point again. Actually, since I come to civil service, because I've worked different roles outside civil service and in civil service and private sector as well, and There is a real genuine, I came to a real sense of love and admiration for what we do. But within it, there was this wider sense of community of what we belong to. And I think if we can have that in a modern civil service, that people feel like I belong to this I have this sense of community, and I have a sense of belonging to something that's really, really important. That's where we need to go. Some might think that's what it was like 20, 30 years ago, yeah. But in a modern workforce, in the way the modern workforce wants to lend itself, to that. And that it may include, and will include for a number of people, hybrid types of working.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ravi. That was so interesting and incredibly inspiring. You have got me wanting to go on a road trip around all of our campuses. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we're sadly going to have to bring this podcast to a close. If you know someone who's living our vision of a modern civil service, please get in touch. We'd love to have you on the show, and especially given Ravi's inspiration, if you are in an out of London campus, please get in touch. We need you on the podcast. Thank you.